There's Roy. Are you gonna sit here? Hello, then. All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody. Have a good class. Thank you, John Sittler. Sorry about your feelings.
Heard what Joe went through. It's
Well, yeah. You have to build some problems in that area, but no, since that's how it is.
the biggest joy for me was like seeing. I know that they're mean when we're attention, but to see the people in the crowd. I don't know. I think those are my people. I'm going to be climbing up a lamppost on Broad Street.
I lived out there. William Penn was still the cost.
Not anymore. On that part of it, from him down, and he's the tallest.
Rule for years. Nothing can be taller than William Penn.
I realize I've been neglecting the Zoom people. Sorry. Whoa.
You wait back.
What?
You wait back.
Was it, you volunteered to open with a brief word of prayer?
I can do it very quickly. I know how to do this in North. Okay. All right, dear Lord, first prayer is for world health. There's 8.3 billion people in the world, and that increased from 1 billion from 1900, 8.3 times. I want to pray everybody's healthier, including mine. I'm down to less than 170 pounds, 32 waist, everything was in check, blood pressure, cholesterol, everything. Very grateful for that. Also want to pray for everybody's finances, and I know it seems like a lot of seniors are here. So good news, there's cost of living adjustment went to 8.7%. Everybody gets that December 30th. That's going to be a major hike from 5.9 in January of 2022. Also, I'd like to pray for everybody's eternal path to heaven. I also like to pray for other pastors, deacons, and then ourselves. And before they got to service this morning at 8:30, silently, Lord already knows everybody's prayer. Thank you.
But all God's people say.
Amen.
So I thought we'd begin by, thank you. In looking at a couple of Psalms, I know people said, forget what Frank told you to do and do what you want. So I'm going to start doing that a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
No, well, I'm not going to diverge too much. So today we're going to finish. If the book of Job is never finished, but finish looking at the text of Job. And then Frank's suggestion was next week his was going to be on theodicy in general, and I don't know how much you talked about that with him. Yeah, not the Homer epic, but theodicy. No split. Sorry. Well, because my students hear theodicy, they're literate enough. That's what they think the Iliad and the Odyssey. But to maybe look at breaking away from the wisdom literature a little bit. And just looking in the Hebrew Bible, some other examples of where God's justice is questioned and challenged, both in the prophets, and with Abraham. There's other stories where these issues come up as kind of proto-wisdom, if that's agreeable to you. And then maybe look at actually some other philosophical issues of theodicy. The problem of evil is often used by some skeptics and cynics as proof, as a demonstration that there's no God. Because if there isn't an omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent God, there wouldn't be evil in the world. So I want to keep this Bible based, but maybe look at some of those other paths, and go look at the two books from the Apocrypha, which are not in our Bibles, to look at that Hellenistic tradition. And then the last two sessions of December, look at the letter of James, which is a very Hebrew book. It really is a continuation of the Hebrew wisdom tradition into the New Testament. And James makes reference to Job, but also to those books like Ecclesiasticus and Wisdom Sirach and so forth. So he's writing in that tradition. But today we're focused on Job, but I thought first we would just go back to Psalm 22, which I'm sure is familiar to many of you. Psalm 22. Did you work? Did you get to sing a Mighty Fortress last week?
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I love that hymn, and that's like the one time of the year where it's ever picked, but anyway, I had to go.
and everything comes from the backpack.
Yeah,
So,
I go from here because I have to go to the nominating committee to Emmanuel last week.
500. 500.
22.
500.
Everyone there? This is the famous kind of passion psalm, because this is the psalm that Jesus cries out from the cross. My God, why have you abandoned me? Why have you forsaken me? Again, it's what they call video games things today, Easter egg, which is very appropriate, because by quoting my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus is actually referring to the whole psalm. Because in Jesus' days, it wasn't known as Psalm 22. It was known as my God, why have you forsaken me? So by saying that, it's showing his agony on the cross, but you see where it ends with praise to God and promise of salvation for the whole world. So it sounds like despair, but if you know the whole psalm, you know what's really going to happen. But looking on the more human level, look how Job-like this is. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me? From the words of my groaning, oh my God, I cry by day that you do not answer, and by night that find no rest. This is Job only asking. At verse 6, but I'm a worm and not human, scorned by others, despised by the people. All who see me mock at me. They make mouths at me. They shake their heads. Let God rescue you. Moving ahead to verse 14, I'm poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. Well, you notice I've skipped over some sections.
Yeah.
Because what on purpose. Because what's interspersed with this? Yet, when you read a lament psalm, I tire out the joke, but look for the yet, look for the but you are holy. In you our ancestors trusted. I'm back in verses 3 and 4. In you our ancestors trusted. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried and they were saved. And you they trusted and they were not put to shame. So I think that's a tension in this. This is clearly Job crying out, not using these words, feeling abandoned. My God, why didn't you answer me? Answer me, talk to me. That's part of the despair in Job, is that Job is being counseled by his friends, and he's crying out to say, I'm not deserving of this. I'm innocent. I don't care what you all say. But God is silent until today. But it's just this silence. I think that's what's partly what's troubling to Job. You know, I trusted in you. We were friends. We were friends. And these three guys call me their friends, but they're not making me feel any better. With you who could provide the ultimate comfort, where are you? Why aren't you telling me why this is happening? And you'll find similar in Psalm 88. Is there not someone perhaps just read through verse 8 just to get a sense of Psalm 88, 1 through 8?
O Lord, God of my salvation, when at night I cry out in your presence, let my ear come before you, incline your ear to my cry. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to Sheol. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am like those who have no hope, like those forsaken among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, like those whom you remember no more, for they are cut off from your hand. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you overwhelm me with all your weight.
And if you.
Oh, sorry, 8, yeah.
Mhm.
You have caused my companions to shun me. You have made me a thing of horror to them. I am shut in so that I cannot escape.
And this sounds like it could be coming out of Job. So much what you see in Job, scholars argue what type of literature is Job. Is it discourse? Is it a didactic narrative? Is it laments? It's everything. But it is ultimately a piece of literature. But certainly when Job is lamenting a situation, calls a pattern of lament. 88 is a difficult psalm because there is no big resolution here at the end. Because in 13 it said, well, go ahead. Look at these rhetorical questions. Every day I call on you, O Lord, I spread out my hands to you. Verse 10, do you work wonders for the dead? Do the shades rise up to praise you? Is your steadfast love declared in the grave, or your faithfulness in Abaddon? That's the place of eternal nothingness. It's like Sheol. Are your wonders known in the darkness, or your saving help in the land of it? Like, what good are people when they're dead? Give me an opportunity to praise you while I'm still alive. But I, O Lord, cry out to you in the morning. My prayers come up to you. O Lord, why do you cast me off? Why do you hide your face from me? And even the last verse, verse 18, you have caused friend and neighbor to shun me. My companions are in darkness. So I think it's always look at Job and companion. This is Job's laments are not isolated case in the Hebrew Bible.
Is there a reason that Job comes before the Psalms?
It's just in the Christian Bible, it's put getting to genre. So it's put with Ecclesiastes and Proverbs because it's considered a wisdom book.
Okay.
In the Jewish canon, it's later because it's put with the writings. It's later book. Everybody know what I'm talking about? The canon, when it was established, the Jewish canon is there's the Torah, and then what they call the prophets, which includes the historical books, and then there's all the later stuff, just called the writings, and that's like Psalms and Job and Proverbs. And then when the Christians put together the canon, the Torah is in the same place, but then there was a distinction between the historical books, the prophetic books, and Job is numbered among the wisdom literature, which is in the middle between the historical and wisdom books. It's just the order is different. Okay. Long. I'm good at making a short story long. Huh? Excuse me? So, I don't know what to do with this. I think it's nice to see that, again, Job is not the only voice of lament. And, I think there's many people who are very faithful and believe and trust, and they never really look at this piece of the Bible, because I feel if I feel this way, if I feel like the psalmist, or if I feel like Job, that shows I'm not a person of faith, or I'm not a good Christian. I'm sure that that's a minority opinion in this room. But there are, I think, people who shy away from texts like this because they think someone who feels this way doesn't have trust. Because there is no, but I love you anyway at the end of this. It just ends with this abandonment. And that's kind of where Job is, where we pick up today. He's not gotten an answer. So let's go to Job 27. Actually, no, let's go to 29. Expedite this a little bit. First, I'm being a pain here. Go back to 27, just go 1 through 6. This is kind of the end. Now, all this debate, let's not forget the central theme of this book is, does Job fear God for nothing? that's the point. When the accuser, God get into this debate, is got to be disinterested religiosity and piety. I think to take this book seriously, we have to accept God in the beginning say, Job is upright, he's righteous, he is. And you need to accept that through the whole book, and he maintains that, he never backs down on that. So that's where his friend, he must have done something, you must observe this for some reason, this wouldn't happen for no reason. And that's kind of, either you're being good because you're being blessed, or you don't want to be punished. Okay? I mean, is that how most of us operate in life? Okay. I mean, if we're doing it because we're going to get a raise or get a promotion, or we don't want to get fired. I mean, so I mean, that's often the way it's presented with God, particularly take on much mainstream modern American Christianity is this prosperity gospel. If you're good and tithe and do all the things you're supposed to do, you're going to be prospering. If you're not, well, you set that one thing, maybe you're going to make more money. But there is this kind of transactional view. And that's what's being challenged here. Is that the only reason that people are faithful to God? Is that the reason that they fear God? It's because they literally fear him. If I do something wrong, I'm going to get sad. Or, I'm going to continue getting my blessings. That's my family.
I have sort of, I guess I'm the doubting Thomas.
Mhm.
And I guess the question is, sometimes I feel like life is just a deck of cards and you pull one and that's your script that you go through in your life. And, that's why some people born into poverty, some into, education, opportunity, whatever, intellect. And that, that you almost need to take a long view of what is it that I'm going to learn on this journey. And that you may have more than one journey as you go through life. But if you think that it's whether you're good or bad, you're going to spend your life being mad at God about a lot of things when they don't go the way you think they should.
Do a lot of people just go through life angry at God because they have this way of thinking?
Yeah, well, I mean, I tried, and I didn't win. Why are you being?
There's a third option there, I think, which is just to be at peace in your own mind. It's kind of a Buddhist sort of thinking, but just to be happy, more or less. You're not necessarily getting more money or whacked on the knuckles, but you're just living a life that you're satisfied with, and that's a lot less. And yeah, Job comes out that the way you're describing a lot, like this is a horror story, this is a nightmare, and hard to be at peace, when that's happening. So. And it's I think a lot of Christianity and a lot of Christians in the past, particularly in America, I think have made it into this good and evil, and you're either one or the other, and that's not necessarily the way you have to look at it. And it took me many years to come up with that basic idea, but that's kind of the way I look at things these days.
I've always thought it was telling that when God finally answers Job out of the whirlwind in 38, he doesn't say, well, I did all of this because I made this silly transaction with the devil, and that it always seemed to me like the prologue and the epilogue were added on later to by somebody who didn't really understand the poem. God essentially says, I'm God, and there's no explanation. This is life. This is, this is the good and the evil, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything else other than this is life.
And that's what we'll see when God finally does answer Job. He doesn't really answer any of the questions that Job was asking.
He says, who are you?
Might be nicer than you think. They're doing in. It's very. This is a really complex book. I mean, I had to recognize that going back for this. That's why scholars say sometimes they think some of the speeches that put in Job's mouth, these must be from his friends, and some things when the friend mouth, this must have been originally assigned to Job, and this contradicts what's over here, and this doesn't seem to match with what's said here. So if you're looking for a consistent theme of argument, that Job always says it this way, and Eliphaz always says this. I'm sorry, we're skipping young Elihu just because we are. But you see, it's different we're coming through. And again, it's meant to stir reflection and debate. And if you try to look for here's the definitive answer, once we get to the end of the book, it's not there. It's not saying that suffering is a mystery. It's not completely cynical like Ecclesiastes, but it is, I think, meeting who people are and making us think about why be good, why be faithful to God, what is our motivation. And I'm just, you may not be there, but his friend, what they're defending is the traditional view, which you still hear. And they're threatened by someone who says, I'm not going to, Job says, I don't care what you tell me, because I've gone through it. Basically, his friends have 8 reasons why they're right. And they refer to the tradition, they refer to this is what our elders have always said, this is what we see in the world, this is what, so they keep giving all these arguments, and Job keeps saying, no. And that's why they get more angry and angry, because he just won't back down. But I think there's people.
This cannot speak. So I'm not gonna.
They're being told this, so they keep it, I think they have, many people think today. That's been so, this is the way the world works, this is how God is, and that's not really where they are, so they put on the pious sweet face, but in their heart, they are angry.
So
That makes sense?
think of what damage is done to people when they have some terrible illness or born with a child that has a deformity or some big problem, and people look at them like, well, what did you do? Rather than why did this happen to you? And I think a lot of people want that because they feel like maybe they're safe if you can say nothing bad will happen, but good. But think of the cruelty to the recipient on the other end, to be shunned by people or have people afraid of them or to avoid them or to lack compassion or support.
I think we've all gone through tough times and expect, I don't know, maybe this is just me, expect God to answer my, prayers, give me an answer now instead of later. And like Job, just sitting there waiting for an answer, and he does it in his time, not my time. Sometimes it's hard to accept.
I'd be getting into more of those stories, because everybody in this room has them. But just even as a young chapel, I remember it was over, I think it was actually when I was in Louisville, not here, but there was a young man who was very, very sick. I was going to make it the family was around him every day. There had to be 10 or 15 people that when they allowed that level of participation. In the room every day, just praying, and they would come to me and they were singing hymns and they were praising Jesus. They said, we know our boy's not going to die because he loves Jesus and we're good people of faith. And I remember that morning I came in and then there was a young man in the bed. He had died and there was nobody there. I said, where's the family? They said, as soon as they died, he left, and we haven't seen him since. And I understood, and we all have stories like that. But suddenly their image of who God was, and this is our relationship, God would not let that happen. Right now, every day I get photos of my nephew's mother-in-law. There's a boy in their family who has cancer. He's going through 5 rounds of chemotherapy. And every day she sends me a picture of him. It's like, there's his beautiful red hair is gone. And here's all this. But we go to mass every day. They're very devout Catholics. We go to mass every day, and he goes to Catholic school, so we know that God's going to fulfill him through. And it just breaks my heart, because what's going to happen does. I pray he does. But again, there's this view that we've done all the right things, so this is what we're going to get in return. So I don't know if that's directly relevant, but you're saying it's hurtful, because I feel like saying what would happen. That's where they are. That's how they're coping.
You just gotta say bad luck.
Huh?
You can't say bad luck.
Well,
Yeah.
but it's just, that's how they're coping, that this is never going to happen. It's just this stuff. But let's look at what Job says in 27. Job again took up his discourse and said, 27, verse 2, as God lives, who has taken away my right, and the Almighty, who has made my soul bitter. This is a direct accusation of God. It's God's fault. You done this to me. As long as my breath is in me and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils, my lips will not speak falsehood and my tongue will not utter deceit. Far be it from me to say that you are right. Until I die, I will not put away my integrity from me. I hold fast my righteousness and will not let it go. My heart does not reproach me for any of my days. I will not put away my integrity from me. I'm not going to cave into my friends and say, okay, maybe you guys are right. I'm not going to do it. And he's also not going to let God off the hook. Okay? God can put Leviathan on the hook. So this is really the summary here at the end. And then if you go ahead, we're going to skip. Go to verse 29. I'm sorry, chapter 29. These are three like really beautiful chapters. In 29, he's really looking back on his previous life. Oh, that I were as in my months of old, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone over my head, and by his light I walked through darkness. And this could sound like it's a reminiscences, you know, of an old man saying, you know, I wish it was like in the good old days. And he really praises himself here. And it can sound like, you could read this and say it sounds like ethical arrogance. Okay. I delivered the poor who cried, the orphan who had no helper, the blessing of the wretched came upon me. I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on, browsing around verses 14. I put on righteousness and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and turban. I was eyes to the blind. And this, maybe say this sounds a little bit egotistical. To be so righteous, because a righteous person wouldn't be so self-righteous. Here in verse 21, the idea of being surrounded by counselors. They listened to me and waited and kept silence for my counsel. After I spoke, they did not speak again, and my word dropped upon them like dew. Very different from God, who has to put up with Hasatan. So when he's threatened by his counsel, they expected his words. I think really to take Job seriously, you have to say this is honest. When God in the very beginning says he's upright and righteous and blameless, this is an accurate description of how he was. So, see, we might look at that and say you're kind of full of yourself, but this is him really. We've heard the narrator say this is what Job was like. We've heard God say what Job was like. Now, this is Job for the first time saying, yeah, I was upright and righteous and blameless. It's valid. So you're still uncomfortable with this. I'm all that, but, you know. But this is a summation. This is Job saying, I really was. All these things which God tells is saying to the council in heaven is validated here. He's validating God's stone testimony. But then in chapter 30, it goes the opposite extreme. Now look at what's happened to me. But now they make sport of me, those who are younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to set with the dogs of my flock. See,
Lena, this is Lena.
and Lena. Now it's, whereas the first one is showing, this is a chapter 29, this is, he's talking about him, but this is like idealized with a perfect life of integrity and shalom, that Hebrew word of, you know, living in harmony with God. That's what 29 looks like. Now, we can look at this in 2022 and say this is very much describing an ancient world. It's very patriarchal, you know, it's very hierarchical. You just have to realize it's an ancient text. But it's showing what a life of blessing and harmony looks like. And now 30 is the exact opposite, but I'm experiencing complete God forsakenness right now, complete brokenness of shalom. Those who were in the lowest rungs of society now are now better than I am, mocking me. And look at verse 16. Now my soul is poured out within me, days of affliction have taken hold of me, the night racks my bones, and the pain that gnaws me takes no rest. Sounds like Psalm 22. Look at 19. He has cast me into the mire, and I have become like dust and ashes. I cry to you, and you don't answer me. I stand and you merely look at me, accuses God. You're just there looking down at me, and I've been crying out to you. I've been putting up with this, and you just won't answer me. You turn cruel to me. With the might of your hand, you persecute me. You lift me up on the wind, you make me ride on it, you toss me about in the roar of the storm. I know that you will bring me to death in the house appointed for all living. At the very end, I'm a brother of jackals, a companion of ostriches. We'll see ostriches later. I love it. It's so that last line, my lyre is turned to mourning, and my pipe to the voice of those who weep. So my heart is tuned to mourning. What used to be joyous songs are nothing but songs. I think these chapters I find it beautiful because you're getting out of the debate. We skip, there's a chapter which just talks about how wisdom is inaccessible. It says how human beings are amazing. We build these mines to get gold and silver, and I mean, even ancient technology and engineering was pretty impressive at this. If we can do all these things, you know, but wisdom, no matter how big you think, you're not going to get it. Okay, not ultimate wisdom. And then here you have, this is what a blessed life looks like. I lived it, I know. This is what the most wretched life is like. I know, because I've been on both extremes. And then here in 31.
Maybe we need to tell our new guys, we're on Job.
It Job now he's really going to testify to his morality, to his ethics. If you have to go through, there's a, I think you know from this precedes in a mythical way, you know, the Torah on Sinai. But the idea that the way that you show your righteousness is by how you treat other people. It's not just making the right sacrifices. So here he's showing that he's blameless and upright, not because I sacrificed 70 oxen to you every Saturday. It's because of how I treated other people. And he's really making his case here. And ancient people would have heard this in a very strong way. This is a series of oaths to begin with if I had made a covenant with my eyes, how then could I look upon a virgin? Okay. This is the old, I mean, it sounds like Jesus. If you can look at a woman with adultery in your heart, you've committed the sin. Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
Okay. People make fun of him. What was we did Jimmy Carter? Anyway. But he's saying, if I've done any of these things, then let me be punished. There's other examples of this, even in the Torah, the Israelites saying, if I've ever broken any of these, this is the punishment I deserve. This would have been taken seriously in the ancient world. This isn't just rhetorical. If I've broken this law, this is the just punishment. So in verse 5, if I've walked with falsehood, let me be weighed in a just balance. Going to verse 9, if my heart has been enticed by a woman. 13, if I've rejected the cause of my slaves. Okay, slavery was part of the world then. Let's not, be anachronistic and say, oh, he's bad, he has slaves. It's the ancient world. But also what he says, when they brought a complaint, what then shall I do when God rises up? When he makes inquiry, what shall I answer him? Did he not make me in the womb, make them? Did he not fashion us in the womb? It's pretty strong. I've got slaves, but we were both made by God. And I treated them well because I saw that they were also in your image. So you'll hear this is if I've ever, it's economic injustice, greed, materialism, personal sins. He just goes through the whole litany here. If I've ever withheld anything that the poor desired, if I've ever seen anyone perish for lack of clothing, if I've ever raised my hand against the orphan, this is the old Torah thing, take care of the orphan, widow, and stranger. If I've ever not taken care of them, if I've made gold my trust, if I've rejoiced because my wealth was great. Yeah. If I've rejoiced at the ruin of those who haunted me. We're just going through the list. I've never sought revenge. I haven't been jealous. I haven't been resentful. I've taken things that come to me. Yes, I was blessed with wealth, but that was the most important thing in my life. And even at the very end here, if my land has cried out against me and its furrows have wept together, if I've eaten its yield without payment and caused the death of its owners, let thorns grow instead of wheat and foul weeds instead of barley. The words of Job were ended. So the ultimate curse is that the land itself would be cursed. Which is, remember, way back in the beginning, that was Cain's punishment. You know, that nothing would grow for him. So this is the ultimate. So he's really saying, if I've committed any of these sins, punish me. So here's his final defense. I've lived this life of blessedness. I know now the other extreme. Tell me what I've done wrong. Give me write up the charge and say, Job, you are guilty of this, and this is why you're suffering. This is direct. Job has finished his defense. And then we have this guy Elihu who shows up, and this is even here. So go to chapter 38. Any good thoughts on this?
My sister and I were talking about the similarities between Job and Plato's Apology. And Plato's Apology, my sister's telling me about it, he kind of goes through the same thing. I've lived a noble life. I've done good. So I have no remorse about the way I've lived my life. And he's steadfast in his defense. So it's kind of similar.
I like this chapter. I think we can so much focus on this argument between Job and his friends. I think these final summation chapters by Job are really quite beautiful. Looking back, I'm looking at now, and okay, let's go to trial. And chapter 38, the Lord does answer him. So I want to just read the first 7 verses of 38. Some people will relish the opportunity.
Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. Where have you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? And the morning stars sang together, and the heavenly beings shouted for joy. Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out of the womb? You still going? How far?
Yeah, why don't you just finish through 11? So when I make to continue through verse 11.
Oh, sure. And I made the clouds its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band. And prescribed the bounds for it, and set bars and doors, and said, thus far you come, no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stopped.
I think this goes on. This is virtually a creation hymn. We could take these words and take the questions out, and it would be the most, to use a word the kids overuse, but truly the most awesome hymn of praise to God ever written. You who shut the sea with the doors when it burst, you who made the clouds its garment, you who said, it's just magnificent. And it really is a retelling of creation from the very beginning, creating order out of the chaos and separating the waters from the waters, and told in a very poetic way. So I think maybe you know it's going to start off with the ultimate, with the creation and on a cosmic level. And ultimately it's going to get into what the goats and the ostriches do, but how God has ordered this creation. A couple of points that are interesting here. 38. Then the Lord answered Job. We haven't seen God referred to as the Lord since the very beginning of the story. All throughout this discourse, it's always God, God, God. It's El or El Shaddai, which means God Almighty. So it's always the God term. It hasn't been the personal name of the Lord. This is a name revealed to Moses, the Yahweh, YHVH. I am who I am. So suddenly it's gotten personal again. This is a personal encounter between Job and God. The relationship is still there. For Job, it's probably frustrating it's taken so long, but he said, answer me. God's answering. This is what's known as the theophany, and I've seen this before. We get the whirlwind. This is the same word that's used when Elijah is taken up to heaven, chariot of fire. It's the same thing. So a theophany is just an appearance of God in nature. So it is like a tornado. And it shows some anger and turbulence. Maybe God is fed up by overhearing this conversation. But he's going to come in and grant Job's request. Some scholars look at this and he answered Job. And if you look at this word in the prophets, what's translated, if you have the NRI, does anyone have the NIV? Do they still? Yes, the English Bible. Does everybody have answered? 38:1, the Lord answered Job. Some biblical scholars look at this and say that word there, often used in other books, like in the Psalms and the prophets, as actually sometimes can be translated as rescued or vindicated or stood by. So it's not just to be answered, it's like, now I'm here with you again, and I'm going to rescue, I'm going to vindicate you in some way, because Job will be vindicated. At the end, God's going to say, Job was absolutely right in everything that he said. So even when Job was really had it with God and was saying, you're up there just kind of, enjoying my suffering, God never says you were wrong to be angry like that. So this is almost like a rescue or deliverance that I'm going to stand here and be with you now. Does that make sense? Could be answered, but it also has a larger dimension. So this is harsh. It's just to say that, who do you think you are? I mean, it doesn't make God look like a bully and, answering these questions. I mean, asking first graders to answer, questions about quantum mechanics. It's like, it's not going to happen. But I don't think it's meant to intimidate or bully. It's like, no, I'm going to reveal to you and make you think on this larger level. And it's magnificent poetry. So it's the light of the darkness. Verse 22, have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Have you seen the storehouses of hail? I mean, we have a more scientific understanding, but when this book was written, all these things were still mysteries to people. It was addressing, do you understand the fundamental mysteries of how the universe works? We don't. And I mentioned this yesterday because Trey Hammond, who's some of you know, I called me yesterday because for another reason, see if I could rescue something. But anyway, as soon as he did it, he immediately said, "Oh, I said we're going to talk about Job out of the whirlwind." He says, "Oh, I love that. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion?" He said, "I love that verse." And it's true. You go to verse 31. I mean, he's talking about the stars or the Mazzaroth. That's the constellations of the zodiac. Do you know the ordinance of heaven? Can you establish their rule in the earth? And then in 39, it gets to animals. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the deer? Can you number the months that they fulfill? It's just really, I think it's just beautiful stuff. Do you give the horse, I'm at verse 19, do you give the horse its might? Do you clothe its neck with mane? Do you make it leap like the locust? Its majestic snorting is terrible. I mean, this is really just a hymn of praise of the creation. There is that interesting passage at 13:18, which kind of makes ostriches look bad. This is the only one that's not in question form. It deals cruelly with its young as if they were not its own. So there's lots of legends there about how ostriches were. But
They have ostriches?
well, they had exposure to them, so they were aware of what was going on in Africa, the animals, they were lions, hippos. But, some legends about them. What's the point of all this? Is this just to humiliate Job? By asking him questions?
I think this is so true.
How?
No. Just fact of, this is it, I'm in charge and. Somewhat.
Who is? Can you say more about that?
Well, if you. I mean, God's on him, all that other good stuff, but these days, he's got a couple of billion you can take care of.
That's one of the tensions in discourse is that the friends are always talking in a general way. This is the way the universe works. This is how God works. This is what God's justice is. And justice comes back, but look, this isn't abstract to me. I'm living through it. So it is kind of that abstract, what's the nature of God's justice person, but I don't care what you say, this is me. I don't deserve this. And that's that tension. So maybe right, this is some things look at this and say the point is God's like, Job, God never denies the suffering of Job like you're overreacting. It's almost like I'm talking to you. You asked me to answer you, and you're getting a personal audience with me. God is God and human is human. And it's kind of neutralizing the ground here. We're not getting into this debate about justice. We have this relationship. So God is not answering any of Job's questions. I'm not gonna continue with this. That's not maybe perhaps that's frustrating, but there are no real answers. God doesn't say this is why it's happening. Maybe he doesn't want to admit this because I made a wager with Satan. But it's meant to create this also at the end here. And the Lord said to Job in verse 40, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? Anyone who argues with God must respond. This is the whole court case. There is a lot of legalistic language in here. Job's made these accusations. Now God is taking on district attorney role. In which Job answered, see, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once, I will not further. Twice will proceed no further. I mean, after basically having the mysteries of the universe, what can I say? God never says you shouldn't be upset, but God's not done with Job yet. Then the Lord answered Job out of the word, gird up your, do you know what that means? That gird up your loins. It's a warrior image that when someone's going to go into battle, men wore skirts, is like pull your skirt up through your belt so your legs are unencumbered, so you can go fight. So get ready for the fight. I'm going to challenge you. So again, it's a question, will you even put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me that you may be justified? That's a hard question. Some scholars even say that's actually something that Job is saying to God. It's in the wrong place. But will you condemn me that you may be justified? So it gets into the nature of God's justice, but then you get these interesting passages beginning at verse 15, where you're looking at Behemoth and Leviathan. The Behemoth is just this big, scary earth monster creature. Some people say it's supposed to sound like a hippopotamus, but not exactly. Huh? Yeah, some think it's a crocodile, some think it's a hippo. It's one of these, what do you call that? They jam things together from all different, something like that. But the point is, it's a terrific, scary land beast. And looking for, it's the first of the, only its maker can approach it with a sword. I mean, everything is scared of it, but I'm not scared of it, God says. Under the lotus plant it lies, in the cover of the reeds and the marsh, the lotus trees covered for shade, so it's kind of hanging out by the riverbank, doesn't seem so scary there. Even if the river is turbulent, it's not frightened. Can one take it with hooks or pierce its nose with a snare? And then you get the description of the Leviathan, which is kind of a primal sea monster, which comes from other ancient Near Eastern literature. It's a symbol of the pre-ordered chaos. Can you draw Leviathan with a fish hook? Can you put a rope in its nose? And it's a big, long description. What a terrifying creature it is. You might look at that and judge what's saying, so what? What's the point of these descriptions of these horrific monsters? Yeah. And these are kind of, they're fun to read. People say it seems like kind of a tangent. Like describing these two creatures. But there's these huge untamed wild beasts which represent the sea and the land. You know, which is almost like these nightmarish projections of the greatest fears people might have. I've got those under control. So it's just meant to continue this sense of awesomeness. So down in 42, Job answered, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. Chapter 42. I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Hear and I will speak. I will question you and you declare to me. I have heard you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. In a sense, that's the answer to prayer. God, when he says, God, I want to see you. Look at it, answer me. Look at that. Therefore, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. So does this mean he's just been so intimidated, humiliated, and mocked that he's just going to sit there and cringe and this is the resolution? I despise myself.
I think he's just realizing that God is bigger than he thought he was.
The Old Testament concept, though, that you're never supposed to look at God directly and you're not supposed to call the name of God by the woman.
Which is, yeah, it's a theophany. So as I see him as the whirlwind, but he's had this personal encounter. It's like a burning
And
bush
then
or
he
something.
realizes, I'm not God.
Let me point an ambiguity here. This is, which I despise myself. In the Hebrew, now I'm not a great Hebrew scholar anymore, but I did look at commentaries before I came in, so it's not wasting your time. It's not a reflexive verb. It's not I hate myself, even though this is what
It's
people
not
have
like
put here. It's I hate, I reject. There's no, in the Hebrew, there's no direct object for that verb. Well, I don't know why they did this. I actually went and looked at the Hebrew. It's not reflexive. So it really just says I reject and I regret. So I heard of you, therefore I reject and I regret. It's much more ambiguous. What's he rejecting? What does he hate? The arguments of his friends, where God has been, we don't know. I'm just feeling regret. I'm rejecting and I'm regretting. So I think it's nice that it's more open like that. It's not like, okay, I'm terrible. So in the Hebrew, it's not like, okay, I was wrong, I'm sorry. He's not sorry. He's lived through this, but he's not getting an apology from God, which is maybe what he wanted. God never says, you know, you were my beloved, and I made you go through this. So he's not really sorry for confronting God. That's how many look at this.
Like the vision says. I knew of thee then only by report, but now I see thee with my own eyes. Therefore I know the way, I repent,
Melt away.
dust and ashes.
Interesting, melt away. So. Never, despite this theophany of God's wonder. Job never says, I'm sorry for all those bad things I said about you, God. Okay? And that's why now we're getting, I think, at the end of the story, after the Lord had spoken these things, he says to the three friends, I'm angry with you, for you have not spoken of me of what is right as my servant Job has. All those discourses where Job really said, why can't you just turn your face away? I can't even spit in peace. You know, I think that you're enjoying myself. So God, everything that Job said was right. I think that's interesting. God's kind of affirming. He had every right to be angry. He is innocent. He didn't deserve it. Okay. And you three are the ones who were wrong because you kept trying to make sense of it. So he says, now, go make a big offering, and my servant Job shall pray for you, and I will accept his prayer not to deal with you according to your folly, for you have not spoken of me what is right as my servant Job has done. That seems to throw that whole thing. It's like, I'm going to punish you for what you said. This whole argument here that God doesn't really care what you do, and now it looks like he's going to punish those three friends. But Job's going back to his old thing of making an offering and making a sacrifice. And the Lord accepted Job's prayer. And I think something from there at the end, he kind of gets everything back manyfold. The Lord restored the fortunes of Job. The Lord gave twice as much as he had before. There came to him all his brothers and sisters, and all had known him, and they had bread with him in his house. So the first thing that happens is he has community again. He's not isolated and alone. So maybe even those three friends and everybody, they'll get together and share a meal in his house. And he's being righteous. He's not saying, I told you so. They're together kind of harmony. They showed him sympathy and they comforted him for the evil the Lord had brought upon him. And then he gets sheep and goats and more children, and everybody lives happily ever after. Some people think it's an unsatisfactory ending.
Sure.
Well, as the gentleman who left, some people think it was the original frame of the story of this guy was righteous, and because he didn't curse God, he got blessed. And they used that framework story to put in this magnificent, which is really considered a masterpiece of ancient wisdom literature. In the middle.
Does have a loose thread though.
Huh?
Does have a loose thread though. Where does Elihu come from? And what happened to him?
Yeah, I skipped him. I think that's a later insertion. It doesn't sound right. But then speaking, it looks like that's the end of Job, who finished his thing, and then God should show up, and then you have the speech of Elihu. And a lot of the arguments he makes, we've heard them all before, and Eliphaz and Bildad.
Actually, it sounds, Elihu sounds more like what God told him.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. People look at this and they say, maybe
That was touching.
even the editors have to reassign who says what, because it sounds more like what God would say, and it sounds more like what Elihu would say. It's very, so out of mercy to myself, I kind of skipped those chapters. Well, I didn't think it really, but you're right. So you see the editing here. So what's the answer to suffering? Write his job so. People think the answer is in Job, and it's not in there. But I think if we just say God just comes out and says, who do you think you are? And we're missing it. There is this restoration. Okay, and that it's all right to struggle with God. I mean, there's no more harsher words addressing God in the whole Bible than out of Job. And at the end, God says, you were right. Okay. Maybe there's even hints that God even regrets that he put Job through this. But God is God, man is man, God understands human suffering, humans need to accept the mystery of God. But don't try to turn this into a transaction that you can figure out why things happen. There is a mystery to this, and suffering is just part of life. And don't torment yourself by trying to enter the mind of God. Just go outside and look at the constellations.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hope that you propose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it sounds like the Lord spoke to the grandchildren and that they're the ones that got to turn around and help back up. So giving him money and rings and, so I think the friends were a big part of the restored blessing.
Yeah, I mean, giving these gifts, it's not like we're giving you gifts because we want to get in with God again. I think it's, they've been chastised and they realize what they did.
And that, you fall on hard times, it's your friends that get you. So,
And the friends are, I mean, even though God doesn't really like what Frank did, he said, you're all wrong. They had their chance for repentance and reconciliation.
So I think he wound up with his friends too.
As well as lots of animals. Thank you. Was also suggestions. Here's where I get to the dancing.
We're leaving.
Much more.
Oh, yeah. Commentaries.
Yeah.
So this is helping the.
Yeah.